Welcome back to the Firebreak. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Firebreak is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative technologies for wildfire control and suppression. Check us out on the web at teamwildfire.com. I have got with us today Bob Roper, who many people knew as Chief Bob Roper, or Chief Roper, when he was the chief of the Ventura County Fire Department for 34 years. That's a long time to hold one job. And, for millennials, that would equal like 10 different jobs. But Bob managed to hold this job for quite a long time and then became the state forester in Nevada. And now he consults people on fire stuff. Welcome to the Fire Break, Bob. How are you today?
Very good, Steve. Nice to be here. And just to let the viewers know, I spent 34 years in Ventura County, but only 15, my last 15 as the actual fire chief. I
Only
actually,
15.
I actually started there and as a volunteer firefighter, ended up working my way up through the ranks. Although
Wow.
making fire chief was never part of the plan originally.
I see. All right. Well, this is, I guess, before they had term limits, right?
Yeah.
Do they have term limits, or can you be a fire chief for as long as you want?
No, in most organizations, you can be the fire chief as long as you want. The only thing is most fire chief careers are usually 3 to 5 years. So being 15 years as the actual fire chief is just, uh, you know, it's a rare group of individuals that make it that long. But
Small
I
club.
had a great board of directors and a great organization. So it was very enjoyable.
That's so you started out though as a volunteer. And
I
was it
did.
a part-time volunteer?
Yeah, it was just a part-time volunteer when we had that program, and it was great to do it. And then I was able to understand the job fuller. I wanted to get on full time, and then from there, it just escalated.
It snowballed, huh?
Yeah.
So during your period there, and I'm talking about the whole 34 years, did you notice any changes in the type and volume of calls that you were getting, particularly with regard to wildfire?
Oh, yeah. Particularly with wildfires, what we began to see was our the seasonal issue of the calls. Okay, it used to be, toward the springtime, all of our wildfires were in, we'll say, Northern California, and so we
Okay.
were dispatched out of the area. And then, we had our fires were in, June, July, August, September, but kind of over by October. Okay.
Okay.
And then what ended up happening over a period of years, our fire season got longer and longer and longer. We were getting drought conditions, so the fire season extended past the first of the year. And then around 2007 was one of the first times I remember that we had Northern California burning at the same time as Southern California burning. And that
Oh,
was
wow.
just really a tough stretch on the amount of resources. And that's a common occurrence today.
But at the time, you were allowed to move resources, right? Because shift your resources to where the fire was because there was one fire or
Yeah,
one
yeah. It
predominant area.
used to be before 2007, in California, Southern resources would go north. And then
Okay.
as their fire season dwindled, they would send their resources down south in the fall. And then now it's just a common occurrence. We're getting fires at both ends of the state.
Wow. And the east and the west, I guess, is as well, right?
Yeah, east and the west with the drought conditions with pest. We used to only have like the beetle kill in the forest was only in the Sierras. Now it's extended east side of the Rockies in Colorado where you are. And
I see.
so we're seeing an emergence of that. We're seeing more wind conditions, especially the high wind conditions in areas like Northern California, where we didn't have those at the same time we had low humidity. So the whole environment of wildfires has changed.
and the conditions are more perfect for uncontrolled fires.
It is, and we've actually evolved in the fire service from what we used to do when we had a less population growth. We used to focus on doing perimeter control with the limited number of resources we have. As the population centers expanded into the wildland urban interface areas, now we focus on life safety and point protection. But if you look at any studies, local government, the federal and state resources have not grown exponentially in comparison to population growth. So we're still trying to do the same amount of perimeter control and point protection today as what the resources we had back in the 1980s and 1990s.
Oh, wow. Which just seems like forever ago in terms of fire evolution.
Yeah, and we wonder why we're not getting ahead of things. You
All
know,
right. So what would have to happen to get ahead of things? What are the barriers?
well, the real barriers is that number one, the public has to understand if they're going to live in certain areas or certain hazards that they have to do. Just because they pay their taxes, they can't expect to have a fire truck at every driveway on every call. Okay. They are going to have to pre-plan their environment, have their go bags, and get ready to go. They actually have to take mitigation actions that really matter for their community. This means defensible space, hardening their homes, proper building construction, and the communities have to actually make sure that they have proper ingress and egress commensurate with the amount of population that are in these hazard areas. We're facing this terrible situation now that all the past great planning conditions that were done for road conditions and so forth are being thrown aside because the policymakers are more focused on adapting for population growth, but they're not adapting their roadways to accommodate those evacuations when those times happen.
Okay, so they might put a new community off the side of the interstate without increasing the size of the interstate to accommodate those additional drivers.
And
And
and and the state of California has allowed accessory dwelling units or ADUs to be built, and these is unbridled growth in areas that people are adding these to existing lots. And if I was doing a subdivision, I would have to go through an environmental process to ensure that I had the proper road widths and access. With ADUs, these are being put in, and there's nobody watching the cumulative effect of those additional units.
okay,
When you ask about the other things we need to do, is we need to make sure that whatever we do on the fuel treatments, we have to do at a landscape scale. We keep doing these checkerboard projects of one neighborhood versus another neighborhood, and they don't connect. Okay. We are spending the money, but they're not connecting. We can't create synergy. So whatever we do with our ecosystems, our communities, we have to do them in a landscape scale so that we're not just doing one house at a time. We're doing it for community protection. And then the last thing we have to make sure that we deal with is let's move into the 21st, 22nd century into fire detection, assessment, and response. We're lagging sadly behind those challenges.
so what has to happen to get us into that new century?
Well,
I guess in an industry that's generally resistant to change, right? The fire
yeah,
service itself, but even it sounds like even when the fire service wants to change, there's other impediments.
yeah. I think what's actually exciting when I watch within the fire service is not against change. The fire service is trying to figure out, number one, how to fund it. Okay. A lot of change that we would deal with technology, we would need to buy the technology. Most
Okay.
organizations are against buying new technology now because the technology is changing faster than the warranty on their technology that they bought.
For
So
hardware. Yeah.
Yeah. So now what we're looking at is how can we create lease, rent, type of subscription programs built on open platforms that we can use existing technology and advance ourselves. So the old axiom was a lot of people thought the fire service was resistant to change. And I disagree with that. We
I
want
agree.
change, we need change. And our new employees that are coming in, they're coming in with college degrees. They're excited. They want to change the world. It's as leaders, we need to get out of the way and allow the conduits so that that change can happen.
And when you talk about new tech, so you're saying the resistance is really, what do we adopt that's going to be evergreen, so that we're not locking ourselves into a new technology that we paid a lot of money for, only to find it, obsolete in 12 to 18 months. So
That and
that's
what
one.
we really need to do is get away from parochial programs. That we need to, again, work with our software vendors on all technology, that they can be designed on this open platform so that they can interact with each other. The sad thing is when automatic vehicle locators, AVL, was put into play, a lot of organizations had them. But if you bought a program was different than mine, even though we border each other, we could never see each other's resources. And that still goes on
Oh,
today.
wow.
So we as the fire service need to set the large parameters that we need, technology, software groups, and so forth, to program things, design things for us for the future that will interact with each other.
So this would be more like TAC, which is interoperable between agencies.
Yes, on some of those, yes.
And I'm curious, when you say technology, uh, you go right to software and apps and platforms. What about hardware technology? It seems like our ability to detect fires is growing rapidly with new satellites and sensors and cameras, but the boots on the ground still are showing up with the same, relatively antiquated technology. Where's the tech growth on that?
Well, there's a project we received a grant from NASA on that we're designing right now. It's not designing the tool, we're designing the framework in this grant. And what's important about this is that we currently can detect a fire, but then what do we do once we detect it? We just get in the fire engine and go. What we're trying to do is create
Right.
the framework so that we could plan, detect, model, and be able to analyze on constant modeling, where will the fire be in 2, 4, 6 hours? What
Yep.
resources are available? And once I get the resources based on their arrival time, what is their production rate? If I could take all that and load it into one program to be
Uh-huh.
a decision support tool,
Yep.
we could better utilize our resources, better utilize our cost controls to make us much more efficient. Because we have some fires that are going to grow exponentially, whether we have 1,000 resources or one. And so currently, Southern California is in a wind advisory condition. So if we have a fire burning, let's put the resources where a smaller fire, something with more values at risk, would be a better use. So that's where I'm saying that technology, not necessarily the hardware yet, but the software and the design of that new technology can really pay dividends.
And when you think about modeling if your fire, are you looking at vulnerabilities within the fire, right? Where's the fire most vulnerable? If your modeling map says, in 6 hours it's going to be here, that's presumably it's going to be there, unless there's some type of an intervention. And then your decision support would show you where your best opportunity for intervention would be, right? It's a wide fire, but it narrows as it goes through this mountain pass, and that's we're gonna jump down with our spears and
Yeah,
hit the
yeah.
herd. Right.
We've been working on kind of a static algorithm as far as the number of resources we respond and so forth. And we need to evolve to a much more dynamic modeling system and response capability. And I believe that the framework we're designing and with the use of AI, we'll be able to do that. And then you can see from a local, state, and even regional perspective, we'll be able to really watch all the resources across the United States and be able to start making key command and control decisions as we have challenging fires.
So do you think that this is going to treat fire more like a real-time game of chess? That on one side of the board, there's fuel, weather, topography, weather conditions. On the other side of the board, there's the resources available to you. And then the AI can game that out in real time as it gets data.
Yeah, we actually kind of prove that today because if we have a fire that burns big enough and long enough, we'll get type 1 incident command teams coming in with all sorts of resources and so forth. What's really key is during the initial attack, when you have the first and second operational periods where usually your life loss and property loss is instrumental, there's not enough time to get those key decision support items in that first IA period. So if we can change this technology, conduit, so that you are we'll call it the 20-year-old fire captain working an overtime shift in an area you've never worked, and you're alerted of the fire, and again, it'll tell you where it is, the values at risk, what's going to happen, and what the resources there, and it'll make projections, but it will always still rely on the incident commander to absorb, evaluate the information it's giving you to make the final command decision.
So it'll make recommendations, though, right? Because
Correct.
as the size of fires grow and the intensities grow, the number of variables grow, and the ability of humans to process all that information will be limited. So ideally, you would sign off on what the AI suggests,
You
so that
could.
we know who to prosecute at the end, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
But,
Uh,
but with that, we have to, number one of our biggest challenges is getting good data. Okay. Because right now we have data that says how many chains can a hand crew produce. It doesn't really say at what elevation and what type of fuel.
right.
We kind of know, like a dozer, what a dozer production rate is. We have
Right.
nothing that tells you what a hose line production rate is. We have those type of data fields that need to be created and validated. And then what we need is the data that's out there between state, local, and federal for the silo walls to come down so
Yeah.
that they're shared and that they can be used toward the common good. That's one of our biggest challenges right now is the data's out there in a lot of areas, insurance companies and so forth, but we can't get it all in one pool to be able to utilize it fully.
Yeah. And a lot of people are really frustrated about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You included, I see. So in terms of production, or the effectiveness, what can a particular apparatus or technology do? This is almost like asking a computer to play chess, but it doesn't know what a rook can do, and it doesn't know what a knight can do, and it doesn't know what a queen can do, right? So it can't really play the game very well. So in addition to what is the production of a hose crew, what are the physical capabilities of the vehicle, right? How fast can it get from A to B under different terrain conditions with what water load on board, right? That it can, what inclines can it climb, etc. And it has to know this for every apparatus, and as well as how often fuel and water need to be brought to each vehicle. So the logistics really get huge when you have a lot of response.
Yeah. And you can just see, like I talked about, when the IMTs get there with enough people, is they're doing what we're talking about already. But at the same time, we have a workforce issue out there that is killing us,
Yeah.
between the federal, state, and local. So we're having more and more problems getting experienced people for IMTs, okay, and just being on the ground. And so technology will help us with cost issues, but will greatly give us the capability to increase our workforce, redeploy what limited resources we have for the greater good.
Yeah, that's tough. And essentially, one of the things I'm imagining that your AI envisions would be to bring the experience, to concentrate the experience of incident management teams, so that a new IMT or a new fire chief can have access to the accumulated wisdom that's aggregated within an AI.
Yeah, and and we look at what we're designing, the framework we're designing. We intend to make it public when we get done, so that the private industry, who's much quicker than the government entities, can take this information and design some products that can interact with each other. But we're also looking that we centered this framework all around incident response. But we also want to make sure that it can be used for planning. So picture this, is you can take new technology like we're talking about here, and I want to design a new community, okay? I can interplay what the road conditions are, what the population is, type of construction. I could put it into this and actually create a model, place a fire that starts here, what will happen, okay?
Yeah.
That's something that's not being done today. And we could actually take this a step further, is begin to project what our post-fire recovery actions should be by what the fire behavior is going to do to damages and stuff, because we can say that based on the number of resources we have, the fire will grow to this scale and size. It's going to be looking at the weather conditions on how nuked the soil gets and so forth to deal with erosion. And then the third component, what we want to use this type of technology in the future, is that we can actually go to policymakers and the public and the fire service itself to begin the dialogue that, number one, we need to do more and more prescribed fires on a landscape scale.
Yep.
And we actually have to, all fires are managed. Some are managed for full suppression. Others need to be managed for the greater good of converting the landscape. With a tool like this, that we can use that technology, we can make believers out of the policymakers and the public that they can trust based on our new technology, that when we say we're going to let this fire burn to this river or mountaintop, that we are confident we can control the sides. But we don't have that today. And so that's why, again, technology, using AI and whatever new technology is going to come out, can really be a game changer. And this is going to be something I think is really exciting, is this could be done within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, the pace of change with regard to technology is enormous.
Yeah. And
Right.
again,
And now you can get AI to write AI.
yeah. And again, with us as government people, we
Right.
just need to get out of the way, design what we want, let private industry build it to our qualifications, and we can have that technology post haste.
Yeah, I think about games like The Sims, and right, where you plan a community and you can see how it's going to lay out, and then even wildfire modeling in games like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor. Someone throws a grenade in a field that starts a fire, and that actually progresses pretty realistically, because Sony put billions of dollars into the modeling program that is, more money
Yeah.
than government can put into these things. So I think you're right. There's a lot of resources available in the private sector that can step up and maybe even just readapt, some of the things they've already built.
Yeah.
Uh, so let's say so you get AI and it's giving you better decision support. What about that issue that you're still showing up with the same water gun, even though the fires are bigger and hotter and require what's going to be the bazooka? What's going to
Well,
what's that going to look like?
well, and everybody looks at, what's that resource panacea going to be?
Yeah.
But what's really interesting now is because the wildfire topic has grown exponentially since about 2017, fairly recent.
Always in the news, right?
Now we have private foundations, we have capital venture getting involved in it, looking at what are the what ifs. We have companies out there now that are looking at delivering major water capability through these jet engines or sprinklers to be able to take a whole mountainside or valley and changing the humidity level of it, which would change the fire behavior, if not extinguishment. We have people that are taking different types of technology to be able. One is called burn bot, where
Yeah.
it's actually can go over terrain and it can burn the vegetation fairly smokeless and is in a safe condition. We actually have now remote operated UAS or drones that are not just the hobby type of scale of things. We have one company is called Rain that deals with a Black Hawk that is remote controlled. And what's important about a lot of this new technology is it's being supported, it's being tested, and it has the finances behind it to make a lot of it successful. What we have to do is kind of go back into all of our historical thought process and mannerisms on how we've always addressed things. And let's look at the experiments. Let's beta test them to see what can work instead of a lot of times we just say, no, it won't work. But I think we've grown now to try to be more open to innovation. And I think that is really the breeding grounds for a vast change in our resource capability out there.
Do you think that the government and the fire department will remain the gatekeeper on what type of technology is applied, or do you envision scenarios where there's some privatization of mitigation and suppression efforts?
Well, right now, I think my gut is just telling me it for at least the near future, it will stay under a government entity because of the legal allowances we have for entering private land type of thing. That is one of the key areas there. The large area that I think that can vastly increase is the private resource use on doing prescribed fire vegetation treatment areas, whether it's mechanical, grazing, and or actual burning. That is the area that's well pre-planned, that the private industry can be done. I can see the use of large master contracts across the country to be able to do that, because we currently are trying to do it with existing fire suppression resources that a lot of times when it's the right time to do a prescribed fire, we're also in a full fire suppression mode.
I see.
And so we have to figure out a way how to vastly increase our resource for doing fuel treatments while still maintaining a full fire suppression capability. And I think that's where private industry can play a key part.
Do you think that off-season fuel reduction projects would be a way to turn, essentially summer wildland firefighters into full-time employees?
very much can be. The only thing is we're seeing is a lot of our wildfires are happening year round now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And so we're currently, there's the current efforts going on now to change the salary and compensation schedules for federal firefighting force. And that's going to have a domino effect with a lot of state firefighters. That needs to be done so we have a viable workforce behind us. Right now, we have areas where the federal firefighters are on seasonal, are off clock. A lot of them go to work for private entities during those off seasons. But we're finding more and more that the firefighters need to be hired year round to be able to do the full suppression when it's needed. Because right now, as those seasonals are laid off, then the burden of fire suppression shifts down to the state level and ultimately to the local government level. And you can see the percentage losses there are causing stresses on ultimately the local government resources, on their capability, not their willingness, but their capability to meet that demand.
Tell me about the process by which IMTs access new technology or hardware or issue private contracts, or when they have a need. There's a fire and we need more dozers, or we need more aerial support, or we need more jet engines or whatever. Who actually makes those decisions, and how do they get them implemented? How do they get the resources requisitioned and delivered?
Well, on most of those that you're talking about, that falls with the logistics chief on an IMT or any incident. But whether it's local government, state, or federal, or an IMT, most entities carry a pre-season approved list of private contractors that are available. So they meet the certs and quals, because we can't just hire anybody to put them on a fire line.
Sure.
So that is done prior to. So the system's in place. If you want to take your question to the next level on innovation and new things, that gets a little harder, because unless a lot of that new innovation has gone through the certs and quals process to be able to prove that it's safe for the operators and the people around it, a lot of those things aren't done actually on the fire ground. We do have some that are been predetermined. They've never been on a real fire, and we get them actually on a regular fire line, but they've gone through all the preliminary steps to be able to make sure that they're safe and functional.
And how active are those programs for your preseason process?
I think they're very active, because from the federal, state, and local level, we know we don't have enough resources ourselves. And we know that when we get into an extreme fire activity area, a time period, that we can't always depend on neighboring resources coming in. So that's when we have to start going to our private hire list as soon as we can. So most everybody makes sure that those lists are up and going before their prime fire season hits.
Okay, so you'd have vetted, that 10 tanker has what you need, or Dauntless Air has what you need, or whoever your dozer sorcerers are, and everybody's red carded, and
yeah,
the machine.
aircraft are a little different, because aircraft, especially, there's a few, we'll say, a few local government resources that have their own aircraft. Okay. Most of the aircraft are done through the state and federal contracts. But even with those are going through their red carding system and everything early enough that they're ready to go when the season starts. But a lot of them have seasonal contracts. They're not on duty year round. And so those are resources that are, they may be off contract and we have a major incident. I call you, can you spin up? Can you get crews in? It's a logistical delay in doing it versus what CAL FIRE enjoys, having their own fleet of resources that are available year round. And so there is still always the annual maintenance issues that may delay the closest resource, but that's just a piece of work.
And it puts the state into a lot of other businesses. Right now, we're in the business of fleet maintenance and helicopter repair and all those other things, right, that come with it.
Yeah.
So what would, there's a talk about a need for innovation. How open are the doors? I say people are willing to look at it, in off season, but what would you describe as the adoption hot track for a new technology? So somebody invents something and they think, okay, this is going to be really useful on fire lines. Who do they show it to? How do you welcome that technology in an easy way for the innovator to get it in front of people?
Well, innovation, no matter what business you got to be into it for the long haul, financially, and your own mindset and perseverance. We have a lot of people that come to like the Western Fire Chiefs, which I'm associated with, looking at how can we get your support and get into the business. So we tell them, first of all, you got to find we'll say a local sponsor, somebody who's reputable, who understands what you're trying to do and can understand your science. And then from there, it becomes a network. How can I connect this innovation with somebody else, with somebody else, with somebody else to try to start building some energy? Then what you try to do is connect the dots between, we'll say, local, the initial innovation, to a state connection. And then from a state connection to a federal connection. A lot of people think that we can just go straight to the U.S. Forest Service and make a ton of money off of getting a new innovation done. While that sounds good, it's not always practical. And what I think a lot of entities are finding now is it may be much more beneficial to take, instead of looking at master contracts, looking to do subscription services on your technology to make up that master class volume, by getting a larger volume of regular users. So what we try to do is to steer people in the right direction and to understand it's necessarily not always the technology issues. What people also have to understand, it's the bureaucratic issues that need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
There is one company, organization, it's called megafire.org, that has actually started some kind of a users group on how to get innovation, how to help new products get online, and help them walk through the maze of issues. But I'll give you an example. We also have the issue of like aircraft. Aircraft has annual contracts, yet these private aircraft vendors, they have new technology that they would like to bring in, but their annual contracts don't pay enough to substantiate the investment in that type of technology. So in the work of the Wildfire Management Mitigation Commission, it outlined that one of the key things need to be done is multi-year contracts for like the aviation industry, which would apply to others too, so that the private enterprises can invest in the technology of tomorrow and have it be used today. The question there was a lot of the multi-year contracts at the federal and state level have to be funded all in the first year, which is usually cost prohibitive. So we have bureaucratic hurdles that we also have to get over besides just innovation.
So someone could have a really great idea, right? A brilliant technology, and it could die somewhere on the highway between their lab and a fire response.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, to the degree that agencies can clear some bureaucracy out, they would be able to receive more new technologies. But they've got a lot of other things on their plate too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't undersell at all what technology can do, not only on the performance, but changing the hearts and mind of the public, the fire service, and the policymakers for the future. And so, the days that when I was a fire chief, I could, based on my years of experience, I could stand in front of the county supervisors or state legislature and tell them, based on my experience, this is what we need and this is why. Okay. In today's world, I can do a better job at selling that. I can bring my experience, but if I can bring somebody from an academia,
Yeah.
and from a private enterprise in to substantiate that, the policymakers approve those things much readier.
Okay. So they're looking for some private nods, right? That it's going to be funded, and the technology is going to be developed on, not on the government's dime,
Yeah,
and that there's been some academic research to validate the efficiency or effectiveness of the technology.
absolutely.
Okay. So those are the things that make it easier to get new tech. Tell me about your NASA grant. How did that come about?
Um, Again, through networking, our work with the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and so forth, with the Resource Legacy Fund, Capital Enterprise, and it's just the networking of people. Now, like I said, we have never had this type of excitement and actually the opportunities of the multifaceted entities working toward a wildfire, not always a solution, but the challenges we have before us. We've never had that in the past. We have created in the past volumes and volumes of reports that can substantiate what our problem is. What we have is a problem of getting everybody in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, to work on the resolve. I think that's what's really been exciting for myself, watching the private foundations and the capital money coming in, circumventing a lot of the government bureaucracy and the inefficiencies of time that we've had. You'll see more advances in that technology based on that involvement of private enterprise toward the good. Now, it's our challenge as fire service officials to at least set the roadmap, the vision of what we need to get done, create the framework like in this NASA grant, and then get out of the way. You know, that's what we should do. And I'm sure and highly confident that private enterprise will be able to meet our challenges. We just have to set the roadmap.
Sounds like it's a more exciting time ahead of us than the times leading up to it. I can
I
imagine, right? If you'd have been sitting right now where you are, with the promises of technology, when you entered your career at Ventura County,
yeah,
how
I
different
mean,
things would have looked, right?
I can tell you that, you know, when I first started, if we had a new advance in technology, it was like in a new portable radio. Okay. But that was about
New
it.
belt clip for it, maybe.
Yeah. You know, um, in today's world, a firefighter, we used to hire firefighters with manipulative skills, okay, construction skills, that type of thing. In today's world, we need firefighters with that skill set, plus with the software, how to work all the different computer programs into the high degree of technology. It's a much more advanced field than what we have had in the past. We talk about detection. We've had devices that are sniffers. We have cameras that are out there. We have now satellites. And some people think that satellites will replace everything else. And I say absolutely not, because what we need are redundant features, because each one of those type of devices have a blind spot or will have a blind spot. So to make the total system work, you need to have redundant features built into the system so that technology can be more foolproof than ever.
And that's kind of good news for innovators, because it means that you're not going to lose out on a contract to someone with an alternative technology. You're both going to be on. That Aurora Tech will be watching from the sky while Dryad is sniffing from underneath the canopy, picking up things that the satellite couldn't see yet because of the canopy. So,
yeah,
right, the more of an overlapping mesh network of sensors and optics, the more likely you can get successful early detection.
Yeah, early in my career, if you asked me the difference between a GEO and a LEO satellite, I would have been a deer in the headlights. But myself and others now can at least tell you what orbit they're in, what level, but the information that is coming out. And the Earth Fire Alliance is launching here in the next couple of months its first satellite fully dedicated to wildfires. When that data starts coming in, that's going to be an exciting time to see what it produces and what it will advise for the future satellite array on what enhancements can be made and so forth. So that's why I'm saying the next few years, our world and the world of the fire services is going to greatly change based on the advances of technology. What we need to do is embrace it, not be opposed to it, embrace it and try to figure out how to maximize it.
Yeah, embrace it, vet it, and participate in that cycle by which a new idea actually becomes a useful product.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's a lot. You talked about the change in the focus on perimeter control as you had populations expanding into new areas. How effective are the strategies of perimeter control in the face of much much more substantial amber cast from huge wind events?
And the response to your question is it greatly varies on the terrain and the topography and the conditions present. Usually, if you're having high amber cast, it's because of wind conditions. In those type of situations, what we try to do is find an anchor point where the fire started and working both flanks of the fire to ultimately try to choke it off. Okay, so in that situation, that works well when we don't have wind. When with wind, what we have to do is sometimes just back off, focus on life safety, get people out of the area, focus on point protection, that type of thing, and getting additional resources in. I think what we have a lot of the time is that we have this urge, the public urge, the full suppression, and that sometimes we just can't do that. Okay, it doesn't matter how many resources we have, we can't change certain outcomes, and that was like the Marshall Fire in Colorado and so forth. You have to just stand back and deal with the collateral damage when it's over with. But that doesn't mean to say that under perimeter control that there's new advances on different retardants, different foams, different resources, and different management techniques. Like I said, not all fires need to be fully suppressed. Or why would I put something in a rugged, steep canyon if I could just use less resources and deal with the top of the ridge. Okay. Much
Right.
more effective on management control. But that may mean that I have to let it burn another 10,000 acres. Okay. And so that's where we start getting into changing the perception and the hearts and mind of the public, the fire service, and the policymakers. And I keep bringing up the fire service because we do have a lot of our own members in the fire service who believe it's only about full suppression. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
there has to be this bridge between the two. And for policymakers, we need to give them the confidence and show them the tools of new technology so that they can stand shoulder to shoulder with the fire chief and support the decisions that are made for incident objectives. Because right now, they will go to the direction of what their voting population says. And
Right.
we need to make sure that we support the policymakers because their support on an incident will support us in the long run.
Yeah. And we're working really against that human nature where we look at the outliers.
Yeah.
Uh, right. That, we all know air travel is the safest way to get from one place to another. But every time there's a plane crash, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to get on an airplane, even though I'm more likely to be killed on the way to the airport. And you get one or two bad escaped prescribed burns, and now all of a sudden, people are afraid to put their name on the orders to do it.
Absolutely.
That's what you're seeing with the politicians, right? No one wants to sign off on the fire that got away.
No, and it's tough in the political world when you have politicians that may only be in office for a few years. Their longevity and everything you've worked hard toward to build and buy their confidence, it goes away after an election. And then you have to start anew. But we also find the same thing with the population groups and the public. I went over to Australia in 2008 after their fires. And the one thing that we learned that Australia didn't realize that they have a transitory population in their wildland areas. And so when I came back home and we had a fire at a community meeting, I asked, how many of you were here during the last fire, which was only like 5 years ago? And hardly any hands out of a packed room
Wow.
raised their hands. It's that type of recognition that people don't live in the same areas very long. And they move into these wildland urban interface areas, especially now after COVID, has allowed the remote work environment that for us to carry the message that to practice Ready, Set, Go and other programs, we can't do a one and done attitude. We have to constantly doing public education because we're going to get that person who just doesn't know.
I was talking to Jeanette Sutton yesterday at the Warren Room, and she was talking about Ready, Set, Go. And she said that, what does set mean, for instance? And is the concept of Ready, Set, Go called something different in every jurisdiction? So that when you dealing with this mobile workforce, they may not know what is meant by different warnings in different communities. What is set to you? I'm just curious.
Okay. Well, the Ready, Set, Go program is actually started in Ventura County along with Orange County, and then we spread it through California, and then it's been adopted nationally. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So ready means is to make people aware, raise their situational awareness of where they're living, that they could be in harm's way. Okay. Let them know what is an ember cast, what do embers do, okay, and so forth. Make them aware, okay. And then if they're aware, then what we do is tell them to pack a go bag, understand what that is, medications, and so forth. The set part is monitor your awareness. Like currently in Southern California, we're under a red flag high wind advisory. that would be set if you live here versus if I was in Colorado today and the snow was falling. Okay. So for today, if you're in Southern California, set means have your car backed into your driveway outside of the garage. Make sure that you have your key insurance papers, medications, this, and that is loaded either at your doorstep or in your car, that you know where your kids are at school, and you know what time are they coming home, what would happen if they got disconnected, what's your plan. That is all the set part.
Okay.
And then go is to go before the law enforcement or fire agencies tell you to evacuate. Go as soon as you can, because all the studies have shown more people die on wildfires trying to escape because they waited too long. Plus, from the fire service, we end up trying to rescue people in harm's way, putting firefighters at risk too, that are needless to have that environment done. So the Ready, Set, Go is a complete program. Now, part of the go part and the set part is that we do have some misnomers across the country about evacuation terms. Some use numbers, some use colors, some use different languages, okay, as far as voluntary, precautionary, mandatory. And so we're still trying to work.
Even location, right?
Yeah,
Zone 221A, prepare for phase 1.
yeah.
What the hell?
And so that's confusing, but if the local government will continue their public education programs to this transitory population, hopefully they'll indoctrinate them to whatever the local language is for the evacuation information. But that is one of the things we're still trying to, a hill we're trying to climb.
Well, so many hills.
Yeah, we have
Wow.
we have no loss of hills to climb.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today and discussing such a wide range of topics. And it's fascinating to see the perspective that you bring to the current problems, based on all the experience that you've had leading up to it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve, for what you do for your podcast and for the listeners listening to it to try to gain their education to make things better for us. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. Folks, you've been listening to The Firebreak. I'm Steve Wolf. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. We're joined today by Bob Roper. Easy to find on LinkedIn if you've got questions for him. And probably he's got answers. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next one. Be well.